gonna pitch to you. Come on, let's go. Come on.
You were hitting good, Maria. That was a nice hit.
Thank you, Coach. Good practice.
Okay, so let's see. About to move on. I added her. Okay, there you go. All right, so welcome to tonight's live stream. My name is Michelle Williams. I am the president of the Houston Education Association. We are an affiliate of the Texas State Teachers Association. And what we're doing tonight is holding a conversation with Latino parents from HISD. What has been told to the press is that, everything's great in HISD. Everybody loves the NES model, and the students are doing great. And this bond is going to be great for all the communities, and it's going to solve all of HISD's problems. So tonight I want you to hear from them. If you are watching live, please share this live stream with your neighbors, with people who are voters, so they can get the real story about HISD. So I want to welcome our fabulous panel tonight. And I'm going to let them, oh, we lost one. Let them introduce themselves. We're going to start with Jessica, and then we're going to move to Dulce, Myra, and then Miss Aurel. Forgive me if I mess up your name. I'm apologizing in advance. So go ahead, Jessica, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jessica Campos. I'm a parent organizer for Community Voices for Public Education, but I am also a parent in HISD. I've got three children, actually, three daughters. I've got one in an NES school, one in a non-NES school, and then one at Basil's Academy. Thank you.
Dulce? Oh, let me take her off of mute. Go ahead. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so my name's Dulce. I'm a development officer for You Discover Math, and we got involved with CVP through Jessica. So I'm really excited to be here. My kids are, I guess, in schools that are adopting the NES curriculum, but we're not directly feeling the full impact.
Okay, very good. Ira?
Hi, my name is Mayra Ramirez. I'm from the Hispanic community. I'm a mother of three kids. I have a daughter, she's 12. One is 8 and one is 3 years old. My son, he's on F Elementary. My daughter is on middle school on Charlestown International. And my little one, he's going to the preschooler in a different district. I guess it's a different Harmon school, but the three are on schools now.
Okay. Next.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me on. My name is Leilita Arellano. You can also call me Dee, and I am also a member of Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services in Houston, as well as a member of Houston Community Voices for Public Education. Graduated at John H. Reagan, well, back when it was called John H. Reagan, now Heights High School, 1998, and also a taxpayer in the district, and I'm a Texas parent of a third grader, dual language, and receiving special education services.
Okay, thank you for you all being here. We're going to start with the first question. Can you share your thoughts on the current state of education within Houston ISD, especially regarding the Latino student population? And anyone can jump in and start.
So to me, the new education system is by far the biggest setback for Houston's social and economical infrastructure. The one-size-fits-all curriculum is failing to provide services to our emergent English speakers and our special needs students. It's forcing teachers to violate federal laws. So that's my opinion.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
girl.
think
Go ahead, Dulce.
I'd like to think my kids are in a pretty nice area as far as the resources that we have available. And, recently we went to the open house and just listening to one of the educators that I feel is very involved with the kids and wants to go above and beyond. It's obvious that she's struggling to keep up with the curriculum that's now forced on everyone. And so I feel like even though some of the kids might now struggle, the teachers are spent each and every day, and it leaves no time for our kids to have the extra time when they need it.
Anyone else?
I can go next. So we're seeing something interesting at a time where students of Latino descent, Hispanic, Afro-Latino, we're seeing a population rise in the state of Texas, as well as in our city, as well as in HISD. But at the same time, we're not seeing the services, the quality of education that we used to have. We're seeing that go down. So why is it that now that our populations are rising, the global majority is growing, and now all of a sudden investment is going down in our students' public education? So that's a major concern. As well as from an environmental point of view, we're seeing these permits expand for a lot of the industries that are having the flares, the fires, the explosions, and those are near our public schools. But we're not seeing the investment in indoor air quality. We're not seeing the investment in lead reduction. So the way that HISD is, trying to say, well, let's focus on a bond. Let's get this bond money to fix some of these problems. That doesn't really jive, because we know that that TCQ has money. We know that the EPA has money. We know there's federal funding for that. So why are you putting it all on a bond?
Yeah, and that is a point. When Sylvia Garcia had her bond information meeting, that was a question that I brought up. The GHP was saying, well, their representative was saying that, oh, we're so concerned about the children and the lead, but I was like, the lead has been here for years, and you all weren't concerned 2 years ago. So why the sense of urgency all of a sudden, since we have an appointed superintendent? And then they had nerve enough to say about the leadership. I said HISD has always had questionable leadership for a long time, so that's no excuse. We have worse leadership with this appointed superintendent. So let's move on to the next question. How do you feel the Houston ISD bond will affect the educational experience for Latino students? So I'm going to preface this with, for the Black communities, it's closing schools. They're closing schools in Black communities, and we understand that the student population is decreasing, but there are other ways to work around this instead of closing schools under the disguise of a co-location. So how do you feel about that as far as the Latino students?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that they're combining like the middle schools with the elementary schools. Edison and I think it's Franklin, for example, just went to talk to some of those parents over there, and they're not happy with this co-location thing because, first of all, I believe Edison is a newer build than Franklin, and it's just kind of like we don't understand why this is happening. Parents don't understand why this is happening. Why are this is a large amount of students. Can you imagine? It's a smaller school and you're combining a middle school with an elementary school, and they're not adding temporary buildings, or at least I don't know yet if that's happening, but that would be my assumption, is that they might use temporary buildings instead of co-locating.
Right, and the money will not go towards actually rebuilding the schools at all, because based on the appointed superintendent's actions, we know that he says one thing and does another. Anybody else want
Yeah.
to answer that question?
I
Yes,
actually have something to add. I think that it's really concerning that we don't know where the money's going. And, considering that we've already seen inflated and misused financial data, we don't even know what we think we know. And so
Right.
how can we be
and
sure
the
that our
thing
kids are
is,
going to be okay moving into other schools when that's removing the consistency that they used to have?
and they say they don't have money for teachers, and they spending the money in something else, not for the schools. They changing things that we don't need to do, like buying, supplements like for a gym, for example, and we don't need to do that. And how no one is doing nothing? Why there's no investigation under this guy? Who's behind him? We are concerned about, because this is like a kind of a crime covered with a beautiful, let's say they're gonna say, oh, we're doing this, that on the social media, on the news, but the real is another thing. They're not doing anything. They're just keeping the money or something, and nobody is doing anything for our
Yeah,
kids' education.
Yep.
That's the
I agree
concern,
with
and it's
Myra.
very sad.
Yes, yes, we are highly concerned. I think when we saw the superintendent come into office, uh, he had a play, and he invested all this money into his play. Meanwhile, we're seeing our best teachers leaving HISD. So these two
Exactly.
things don't make sense. The priorities are not with our children, although they say that they're for our children, but they're not.
Yeah, it was like $470,000 that he spent on that musical that he put on for the teachers, and then he spent another $1 million on these adult size exercise bikes that are probably still sitting in boxes. In some cases, at our school, they were being used they were really just collecting dust. Some of them are already broken. They're definitely not being put to use. I mean, that's $1 million that just went to nothing. I mean, we were at one 118 million deficit, and now we're at a 470 deficit. I mean, how are we going to give this guy more of our money when he's misused all of our funds all year long? It's been
Absolutely.
ridiculous. Like,
Exactly.
why are we even considering this when this guy doesn't even listen to parent or community input? I think that
Yes.
in an ideal situation, if a proper bond with community input was placed, then maybe our Latino children could benefit from the changes. But right now, under this unelected board who just keeps giving Mike Miles, the authority to spend money ridiculously, I don't think it's a good idea.
And can I add one more thing? Also, the governor hasn't given us 1 cent. The Texas legislature did not invest 1 penny into our public schools. So why don't we hold off on this bond and let's see, what is the governor going to give us? What is the Texas legislature going to do for our public schools before we start talking about more debt for HISD?
A debt that our grandchildren are probably going to be paying.
Yeah, we had a union meeting today, and they were asking about the bond, and I said the same thing. I said we'll be dead by the time it's paid off, like almost 40 years. So it's ridiculous as
It's
to
ridiculous.
what they're asking. And what the Chronicle put out an article today saying that the interest rate, which the school district has to pay, will double, which will increase our debt service.
Yes, so let me tell you something. For those of us who have are holding on to our little homes, right? We're holding on to these properties that we have in Houston, and we know that those
Exactly.
rents are going up, those interest rates are going up, and we're doing everything that we
Yes.
can to hold on to this, to pass it on to our children. What are we going to pass on when we're getting forced out, when we can't afford these interest rates anymore?
And
Yeah.
absolutely, that is an issue because even I live in the suburbs of Houston, and it is getting more and more expensive, and they're pushing onto the local taxpayer the responsibility of the school under the Constitution and the Texas Constitution. It is the local and the state. The state does not give HISD much money. It gives HISD $79 million, of which 179 million goes to recapture. So the local school district is supporting itself through local taxes, and that is not enough. And then the state has nerve enough to penalize the school district because it does cost more to educate Latino children because we're supporting them in language acquisition, which is, it takes more. It takes more. We have a shortage of bilingual teachers. We have a shortage of people who are coming into the field, and then trying to transition them and help them maintain one language while acquiring another. It takes more money, just like it takes a lot for special education. And they don't want to invest in that education for these students.
No, they don't. And
So,
matter of
so the,
fact, in speaking with several parents from different schools, Latino schools, for example, the one that Myra goes to, Neff and Benavides, a lot of those parents have been receiving letters stating that they are waiving the ESL class because their students are now ready to move on. And a lot of these parents are like, but I don't feel that my child is ready to move on out of the ESL services. A part of me feels like they're just trying to do away with as many students as they can so that they don't have to fund these services. And this is another issue that I'm experiencing with my child with dyslexia. So last year, for example, I was sitting in the pickup line waiting to pick up my kid, and her sped teacher came up to my window and she says, "Oh my gosh, Miss Campos, Sophie's doing so well and she's almost through with all the dyslexia material. We actually don't think she has dyslexia." I thought to myself, I knew for a fact that this was just the beginning of something. And then this year, they're telling me that my child doesn't need dyslexia services, that she's doing wonderful and she's doing great and she's excelling. But let me tell you something. I'm with my kid every day, and I can hear her speech and I can hear her read. And I know that my child is not okay. I know that she desperately needs more services than what she's receiving right now. I know what a good quality education is. I grew up in the suburbs. I went to Clear Creek Independent School District. I went to some of the best schools in Houston or in Clear Lake. But I know what it's like to have a good education, and I'm seeing in real life time my two girls receive two different types of education. I'm seeing my high schooler go to a non-NES school that is giving her all the resources that she needs and all the extracurricular activities that she needs to be able to find herself, while my other child in an NES school is not. And when she needs more services, her school is I think 99% Latino, and they need more services. And we're not getting that. I'm seeing it. I see it every day when I drop off my kids and I pick them up and I hear, I started keeping a journal of the things that Sophie says at her school. It's depressing. It's depressing to hear my kids.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off,
Oh,
but I
okay.
just think that's the problem with the property taxes being involved. We're paying
Yes.
for this. So how do we not get a decision or a say in any of what's invested in? It's our
That's right.
kids. And so we're paying for our kids to be educated. And a lot of the resources that actually help these kids advance, not even be successful, just advance enough to start to have a chance, are being cut out. And it's
They
our money.
increasing the taxes. That's the baddest thing for
It's
our,
our money,
neighborhoods.
I was reading an article the other day that states that we do make up 42% of, I think around close to 50% of the population in Houston. But we've brought in 70% more economically to Houston. And I feel like we're not being heard. It's what is that called? The taxation without representation. And then we've got half of the HISD community, the parents are clueless, or not clueless, but they're afraid to speak up. Many of them are immigrants. Many of them are not going to speak up about what's going on and the changes that are happening in their school. I'm actually having to contact parents and hear their stories and beg them to speak to someone about this issue. Like, you need to talk to someone about this. You need an advocate. You need a lawyer. You need you need more resources, but we need to say something, because if we don't say anything, they're going to continue to beat down on us the way that they are.
Yeah.
And
it's going to drive people out of the district, out of their homes
It's
and away
already
from
happening.
the city that we call home. And that's scary,
Right.
because then what's left?
Well, we've already lost 9,000 students from HISD this year. 9,000 students have left the district. I can tell you the students from Pew Elementary all went to Yes Prep. All of Sophie's friends are at Yes Prep. Of course, I'm not going to choose
Yes,
to put my
because they're
child.
looking for other options, because we cannot leave the kids on these schools because the teacher are, teaching sad or nervous, or they just trying to hire anyone, any people with no degree, with anything. And what about the other people who has a really good degree? They study, they went to the university, they get a degree, they putting them in a corner. How about that? That's a really sad,
Jessica,
giving job to anyone. It's dangerous too.
Yes, Dee?
sorry, Jessica, quick question. You said the students went to Yes Prep. Would that happen to be Yes Prep East End? The one by
I believe
J.R.
so.
Harris?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so let me give you an example. Jessica's talking about a Pew Elementary that sits, I believe it sits outside of a 6-mile radius of Valero, the Valero refinery. The Valero refinery is an RMP refinery. It's a risk management plan, meaning that anything within that 6-mile radius is directly impacted if something happens to that refinery. Now, those children were safer at Pew versus them being at Yes Prep East End, because Yes Prep East End is only like maybe right under 2 miles of that refinery. So what did HISDs do? They created a situation where children were safer, and now they're moving closer to a more toxic environment.
Right.
And we know what that did with Cashmere Gardens area. It became a cancer cluster.
Oh, yeah.
So it's crazy when they're asking us for money and they're putting our children in danger every day. Like, why would we give you any more money?
And then telling us that the taxes aren't going up. It is going up. It has to go up.
Like
Yes.
the total opposite of what they were set out here to do, they're doing. Like, they removed qualified teachers, they removed libraries. I mean, things that were of quality that we had in our Latino schools have been removed. Our magnet programs, for example, at Pew Elementary, we had the NASA robotics. It was replaced by a dyad program that could be taught by just about anybody off the streets.
Right.
Yeah, HISD was the district that created the first Mexican American Studies course that was approved by the State Board of Education. That came out of HISD. That was the model, right? And you had a beautiful program in HISD. Where is it now? You've got a situation in Texas where State Board of Education passed Mexican American Studies course. Then they passed the African American Studies course. And right now you have 2 additional courses being planned. But where is HISD in implementing those courses? They should be leading the state, but they're not, because we're currently under this takeover that is not bringing in culturally competent materials. They're not doing the professional development that we used to have before the takeover, right? So we've looked at the numbers. The numbers to these courses means that the students that are taking these courses, Texas-wide, those numbers are increasing, right? In a moment where teachers are leaving the field, teachers are leaving this course. They're leaving the profession. So we're seeing more students say we want ethnic studies, and teachers are leaving. There's a disconnect here. There's no investment in there's no real commitment of HISD saying let's bring in culturally competent material.
And that was one question I raised when I went and spoke in Austin. Do teachers not get high quality resources and students get worse education because we're in a takeover? Because that's essentially what's happening. We have
Right.
gone from what was good, and make no mistake, HISD had issues, but we didn't have these issues. We didn't have
Right.
uncertified teachers. We did not have just a poor curriculum. That curriculum department, they and you know, they want to say, well, you're talking about people. No, I'm talking about the people who are bringing in the people. They cannot get it right. It is a that NES toilet paper has more value. It does not. It's horrible. Misalignments. It has errors for days. And then they want teachers to spend their time, limited amount of the time, to correct them. And then say, well, you should give grace. No, what I want is what we had before. We didn't
Right.
have any error-ridden curriculum. We
Right.
didn't at all. And it was something that the teachers who were first year teachers could use as a starting point. No curriculum is great. We always have to add to it. But that NES is horrible.
Yeah, it's a one size fits all curriculum. I did have the opportunity to sit in the classroom and do an observation of my child's classroom. And the one thing I did notice is that the screen was split in half. Half of it was in English, half of it was in Spanish. The teacher was giving the classroom very fast pace, and she was doing it in English. And there were students in the classroom that that didn't speak English very well. So those students were having to learn from whatever was on the screen, which, by the way, was horribly translated. So these children are actually not getting an education because it doesn't even make sense what they're reading on the screen. So after 45 minutes of a boring scripted slideshow, they're taking a 10-minute test in every class every day, right? And it's timed, and you've got children with anxiety, you've got children with dyslexia, with ADHD, and they're having to look at the timer, and they're almost done. Oh my God, I still have 2 questions. My friends are already done, and I'm not done. And it's this anxiety. I don't know, the environment that it's not healthy for our children. It's not healthy for my child, and it's not quality education for my child, nor is it for
Yes.
any children.
Especially
And
the
also,
smaller
I see
kids.
my
If you start
child
to think
great.
about, yeah, you start to think about the smaller kids. My son, my youngest is 5. He's in kinder, and he wakes up not wanting to go to school every single day. I don't think that I've ever had one of my kids hate kinder. And he recently told me, and so I'm about to reach out to his teacher. They are taking tests every day. He is 5 years old, and he is not getting to be 5 years old. I cannot imagine having tests at 5. And then, not even just to pile on to the things that you said, Jessica, if you have a split screen for a 5-year-old who doesn't even know how to read, just so that you can say you gave them the material in Spanish, they cannot read it. What are you doing to my 5-year-old son? He's worried about the test and about not doing well, and he hates school now, and how can I tell him not to?
Yeah, our children are being reminded every day of their failures. Every day.
And my child is having the same issue. I see his grade is going down. I never seen my child is 60 on on one grade. And I was so worried because I haven't never been suffering like this. And he's suffering bullying and he was crying. I think maybe 4 or 5 days ago he got somebody kick his face on a soccer, he said. But I went to the school and they said, oh, this is a normal playing kids. How is it normal? Nobody told me that my kid got hurt on his face. And they said, oh, this is normal. How they normalizing, something that is not right? They don't even call me to tell me, oh, look, this happening at the school. It was probably they playing anyways. Whatever it is, they should call me and tell me, but they don't saying anything. Even my kid's grade is going down because maybe he's suffering bullying. Maybe he's thinking different things, and maybe he's scared learning. And he said, my teacher always freak out. She's always screaming, and we got scared. We don't learning well because they hiring any type of teachers, any people.
Yeah, and
Well,
then the
even the teachers that have
communication.
been there are struggling to manage the stress. They're freaking out. They're constantly looking over their shoulder to see if there's an administrator walking down the hall checking in on them.
Right. The other day, I had an ARD meeting, and the teacher admitted to not being able to give my child the additional time that her accommodation requires. And I saw her face. She looked so terrified. The teacher looked terrified. I had to tell her, look, I understand that this new education system does not allow you to be able to give my child the time. So I know that it's not your fault. But teachers are terrified. And they are not being given the time to be able to give the special needs children the accommodations that they require, or the emergent English speakers.
Yeah. So here's a question. What are your impressions of, and this I'm laughing, what are your impressions of Mike Miles's leadership so far, particularly in relation to fiscal management?
I
Let's
have a lot
define
to say about it.
let's
I have a
define
lot to
leadership.
say just because I think the reports are very skewed. They're misrepresenting every single population that they want to represent rather than the entire population in HISD. I feel like their transparency is not there, and they've clearly forgotten that they are a public organization that responds to the community, and they are not doing their job in making sure that there has to be authority to spend money. And there isn't. They're giving this man like an entire spending account and saying, "Don't worry about it. Just do whatever you want to do with it." That is not spending funds wisely, and it's not money that they've raised yet. And so like how are they not getting an approval for him to spend any of it?
So this is like your teenager running up your credit card and then asking for another credit card and then leaving us with a bill.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I was thinking, you think about let's say a 23-year-old, you give a 23-year-old that is just starting to live their life, here's $100. Go do with it whatever you want, but just make sure it benefits some kid somewhere. And then you give it to a 23-year-old single parent and tell them the same thing. Who do you think is going to handle it better?
You
Probably
know,
the person that has a kid. And
Right.
he's not, so like considering that Miles isn't even from here, he's probably not going to stick around after the fact because nobody wants him here. What's going to
Probably
happen
he wants to
after?
destroy the education because they don't want Spanish going to the power. They don't want anyone to be, a good attorney. They don't want any a good new president can be a Hispanic. You never know. That's what they
Yeah.
want. They want to destroy kids, Spanish community education. That's what I see in
it's
our,
Our
black
he
people
plays
to
he plays
education.
a part of a bigger plan, right? And this bigger plan is a dismantling of public education. Because
right.
we know he works for Greg Abbott. We know he works for them. He's not really working for us. So going back to this, he's not a teenager. He is not. He's a fully grown man who has served in the military, who was appointed HISD superintendent. So we didn't elect him. There is no democratic decision making going on here. He was appointed. So let's start with that, and then let's also say no one person is going to save us. There is no charismatic leadership. Nobody going to save us. We're going to save ourselves. All of the
Right.
people here, along with the students, along with the teachers, along with faculty, staff, and whole communities, we are going to exercise our agency and take back our district.
That's right. I like you,
Yeah.
D.
And
I,
I love
yeah,
that.
and to your point, Myra, I do
Yes.
believe that there's a larger issue because if you destroy education for children, you wipe out generations. And
Yes.
in the Latino community, and I keep telling people, I can't say this enough, the playbook of the United States is the same playbook that it had with African Americans. They did not want us to read. So they know if they deny language acquisition services, then your children will not be able to read effectively
I am on a call.
in 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 English. They won't.
Yes.
That the research is clear on that. And I keep telling a lot of bilingual education teachers that you have to get the kids to maintain both languages. I tell my students that I have told them you have to maintain both languages. One, because that's your culture. Secondly, because you're
Yes.
acquiring a new language that helps you participate in government. And if you cannot participate in government, then it allows the majority to do what it wants to do.
See, that's when I thought that this was all really fishy, was when they started messing with our dual language program. Because the first thing that he came here and said is that he was preparing our children for workplace ready. What was it? 2035 workplace ready. But if you live in Houston, the melting pot of cultures, you would expect children to know a second language in 2035, right?
Yes.
So why are they removing our dual language? Why did our dual language change from 50-50 to 80-20? You know, this is where I was like, okay, something's not right. Because if they really wanted to provide us with equity and wanted to improve our children's future, then a second language would be necessary.
But it's not just any language. I think it's mostly the Spanish language, and it's that dual language program that is taking the first hit because my kids' school has Mandarin built into the curriculum. They still take Mandarin. They're still learning it. And if you really think about it, um, I feel like what they're going to set this up to be is our kids either know English or they need to catch up.
They don't
Oh, yeah,
speak
sink or
And
English
swim.
yet.
and outside of that, you have to learn a different language, not Spanish, because why would you learn Spanish? Why is that beneficial to you? But it is. I'm a bilingual person, and
Yes,
I think that it helps me because I grew up, and my parents were documented. So I was born and raised here. I knew how to speak English before they got the hang of it, and I translated things for them. And and so
Exactly.
my parents understand the importance of education because they didn't have the access to it in Mexico. And so if
right.
you're really driving people out of here, where do you think they're going to go? Because they're not going back to Mexico. Like that's not an option. And so I feel like when we start to look at what the problem is and how to address it, yes, we do need to drive him out, but at the same time, I think what we first need to start doing is building the community that we have, the organizations that
Right.
are ready and willing to provide the services that the schools are not. Similar to, the Baltimore Algebra Project, the Algebra Project in general. They cater to their students because the schools weren't. Public education systems were failing those students. And so we need to figure it out for our kids first and then start pushing the schools to really like, hey, what are you doing? We're doing our part. This is our community, this is our family, and remind the
That's
board
right.
that they have a responsibility to the public. First and foremost, you have to answer to us. And I feel like they are overlooking it because they want us to be patient with Miles. And what are we being patient with? He's ruining everything that HISD was finally starting to move forward in.
Yeah.
The disadvantage, Michelle, is you have some families who can afford the private tutoring, who can afford the private Spanish camps and all of that other stuff. So why is that only available to certain families, but not all families under a public school system like HISD? So when we have something like a dual language program, we're not just talking Spanish speak. We're not just talking Latinos, Mexicans, Latin Americans. We're not just saying that. We're saying any student who is able to get into the program. We have had Spanish speak. We have had English speaking families take part in dual language. Have nothing to do, have no Latino, nothing in their background, and they're in the program, and that's beautiful. That's what we want to see. We want to see whoever wants to take dual language, take the dual language because you can, because it should be accessible to everybody, right? But the problem is within dual language, what I've seen is it looks like English is the goal.
Right.
English is the goal. Assimilation is the goal, rather than it being the fully development of two languages, not just English, but also Spanish. So why can't we have that?
Because here's the thing, and if it's the history of the United States. When you talk about the United States,
Preach.
and we're going to talk about the other history that the kids are being, not the oral history that I know. We're going to talk about the history that's in the history book. So in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So that's the history. The history of the United States is supposed to be quote unquote European, and none of us existed. That's the history of the United States. And what they find in dual language is that they're promoting your culture, which is not European. And it has nothing to do with learning Spanish, is that they don't want to promote your culture. And that's
Right.
anybody's culture who is not European, whether it be Black, Indian, Asian, they don't want it. Just like when I was in Austin speaking before the House Public Education Committee, one of the state reps with his arrogant self had the nerve to say, our founding fathers, what's wrong with putting Christianity into our education? Our forefathers, no, those are your forefathers, because mine was enslaved and in chains and on plantations. So let's start there. Those weren't my founding fathers. Those were yours. At the end of the day, we have to understand what the United States stood for. It started with genocide of the Native Americans. Christopher Columbus was not the first one here, and he was lost and his crew was starving. That's how he ran into the United States. And they committed the first genocide by lacing blankets with smallpox and killing off the Native Americans. So when you look at the history and the ugliness of the United States, then you'll understand why that's not being promoted.
Yeah, I feel like we're going back to the times when our tias and tios couldn't speak Spanish in schools. We're going backwards in time. Before all of this mess with the takeover, I would have never thought that this was the reality, but it really is. It's racially, this is discrimination. It feels like,
but it doesn't have to be like this. It does not have to be like this.
Well, until we get, and here's the issue. So when Hispanic, Latino communities and Black African American communities come together and create a large voting bloc, what it does is dilutes what Austin and what Washington looks like. You all saw it when they started with the rating. What was that in San Antonio? Saying that they were registering illegal. Yeah. So it starts there with taking away our right to vote. So that's why it angers me to hear African Americans, Black people, Latinos say that my vote doesn't count. People don't go after something that is not valuable. That's why they're trying to dilute our votes, because it does mean something. That's why they don't want us to vote. That's why they don't want your children to read. That's why they're not going to promote your culture, mine, or anybody else's, because they want a standard of the haves and the have-nots. The countries that are fleeing the haves and the have-nots are coming to the United States under the idea that it's better over here, not knowing that they're trying to take us back to the same thing that they are running from. It's the same thing. Yeah, it may be better in terms you have a house, a roof over your head, and you're not sleeping outside or whatever, but the oppression is still there. The school system is a form of oppression that is taking place. Make no mistake, that is what's taking place, and they are attacking it because it's the same thing that was used when slavery with the Native Americans, all of the people who are not European.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I will add, Michelle, is we have learned better though. We have learned better. We have learned from there is a beautiful tradition, right? There's a beautiful radical tradition of freedom schools, of folk schools, of even Huelga schools in Houston, right? And so, and that was all because people like y'all, people like everybody listening right now, took it back. They said this it doesn't have to be like this.
Right.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I feel like
And
for
it
too
doesn't.
long we've been accepting whatever is given to us. We accept the scraps. We've always just, I'll just be quiet over here in this little corner. No, no, no. We need to all be vocal about what we want. We are taxpayers. These are our schools, our children. I can't stop saying that because we need to remember that these are our children.
Mhm.
These people don't even have kids in our schools. They're making decisions
Yeah.
for our children. This is not okay. This is my kid. These are our children. We need to be fighting back. No one's going to fight for our children better than us.
Right.
We are the
Yeah.
moms.
And I think we need to make sure that even though we have the fear, the only way to push past the fear is to go through it. And
Right?
I think that
Yes.
that's our ultimate pushback and hesitation. And it's unfortunate because we are the minority is the majority, and we can make change. We can do something about this, but we like you all said, we need people to speak up. We can't be the only ones, screaming.
I
Yeah.
gotta say, I've been doing some block walking, and I gotta say, I'm so proud of my community. I am hearing that there are people that have never voted that are now voting, that are going to be voting. This is their first time voting. I am a first time voter. I voted for the first time in the last election. And not because I thought that my voice was not being heard, but because I was not educated. I didn't know what politics were. I didn't understand them. I didn't know what everyone did. I'm learning now because I feel like I was affected by something. And I realized that maybe the reason this happened to me is because I wasn't voting, because I wasn't saying what I wanted. So now I'm damn sure going to be saying what I want. And this new education system is not what I want for my children.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's an obstacle too for the Latino community is not having enough education and in just,
Yes.
not just
Yes.
voting, but in financial literacy and what do the numbers mean? What do the statistics mean? What does
Right.
any of this mean? And what do we do
What are
with it? We don't
what are
have
my
enough
rights?
education in it. Yeah, like
What are
we
my
don't have enough education in it. And if we're learning and, I'm a first gen student, my parents have no idea what any of it means.
Mm.
And so even if they did go to vote, say for the president, they don't know what any of the other things are that they're voting for. So are they just clicking, something else that they're like, let's just pick this one? Or are they choosing no vote? Like we don't know what's going on with people that are choosing to vote but don't have all the information on the other things.
right?
Yeah, and these conversations can happen in all of our community centers, and they are happening right now. We have great resources like the League of Women Voters has a voter guide, right? But we know it's not just about voting because what's going to happen the day after the election? We're just going to forget and then let somebody, oh, we got whoever we wanted in office. They're going to save us. That's not the case. So
I'm
it's
gonna hold them
voting
accountable.
and we keep doing our community schools, right? Yes, for the K through 12 and adult education. You said financial literacy, okay, and media literacy, and popular education, and
Yeah.
we're gonna add on to that political education. So
Okay.
we're gonna keep doing the and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a question I have, and I asked all the other groups: is if there was a bond, because I believe this bond is going to fail. So when we come back to the drawing board, this is a two-part question. What do you think the role of Latino parents and the community should play in the decision-making process for the bond? And also, what specific challenges do you think bilingual students face if another bond was to be proposed, and how do we get past that?
Well, first of all, they need to. So every community is unique in its own way. If you really want to provide equity, you go to each individual community and talk to the parents and hear, get input from the community, individual communities, not you coming in and saying, this is what I think you need, and not know whether that's what we actually need. So I think that it's important that if we're going to do this bond thing, that we have the input from parents and community members that are being affected by the changes.
Right. And I agree with that. I think that HISD needs to be reminded that they have a standard to uphold. They have a community to serve, and they have the public to answer to. And so, just in looking at that, any public organization is supposed to go out and research their target market, which is, the parents that are taking their students to school. Those students, what do they need? Because kids have a lot to say. My 5-year-old is telling me things. Kids have a lot to say. And if you don't want to interview the students, the parents is a good place to start. The educators are a great place to keep going. And, the administrators in the schools, not in HISD, not in the office building. I'm not saying that they don't have a say or they don't have opinions, but they're taking people with no experience right now. And so I would be just a little worried that, their salary is impacting their voice. And so I think that looking at the parents and looking at the educators, we know what our kids need. I have an idea of what my kids would need in their school, but I don't know about Jessica's kids' school, and I don't know about anyone else's kids' school, and so the parents are the voice for the kids.
Right.
Yeah. With that, Michelle, anytime you're dealing with a bond, just like we dealt with the last bond, then we're going to talk about oversight committees. So who's going to be on the oversight committee, right? What are they going to be looking at? Who are the vendors? So whatever bond is going to come up after this one, let's get 2 steps ahead of that. Let's start thinking about who are going to be these vendors. What is that going to look like? What do the plans look like? Who is going to be on the oversight committee? Let's start getting those groups going, because whoever is already tracking this at that local school, that's who's going to also see this on the other side of whatever that bond decision is going to be.
Didn't Mike Miles choose the people on the committee, the oversight committee?
He did.
Well, I'm sure he did.
Even if he did.
And so I think if the bond fails, HISD needs to take a really hard look at their board. Clean house, that is an option. And I feel like that probably should have been the first thing they did. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like if they're going to consider another bond, people should start to request that the board is replaced, because they've already failed us in more ways than one. And to do this a second go with the same board is not going to be good.
That is a very good point. I'm disappointed in all of them. And I can say that I'm more disappointed in the African American and Latino people on the board. They have done nothing, absolutely nothing, to uplift, to make better, to do anything for these communities in HISD. They do nothing.
It don't matter. It don't matter who those people are. They don't speak for us.
No, they don't.
They don't speak for us. And likewise, I don't speak for the whole Latino community. I don't.
Right.
We're not a minority.
The goal is, when you talk about representation, we're talking about proportionality. So you would think that Black people who look like me, share the same melanin, would be a voice. But instead, We have Adam Ravon, and this is what I'm hearing, that he wants to run for city council at large. I promise you, if I see his name on anything, I will be the first advocate against him. Because yeah, you did something. You checked a few no boxes, but you still went along with the foolishness when you knew better. All of them. You represent. They put you on there for other reasons, and they're using your melanin in your skin to make the perception. And if that means that none of them have any moral compass. And I've said this before, they have sold out their communities, which they share skin colors with and surnames with, for political, and I don't know if it's monetary, but I definitely know it's for political gain.
Right.
So that is my issue with them. That's the bare minimum. They have no moral compass. And Audrey Momini, she's a disappointment. I has to be to her mother, because her mother is a retired librarian.
Yeah, they check boxes, but they don't represent us. And it's profits over people.
But the thing about, and you can say that, but until they were put there, and even the elected board, we had issues with them. And the issue I see, the bottom line is the community was not involved prior to this takeover. And I can say that because I was there at the board meeting.
You did have people involved. You have had people involved in
not
even
at the board meetings.
Yes, ma'am. Even with the folks that got elected. Because the difference is we elected those folks, and if we didn't like them, guess what? You gone.
It took them years for that to happen. We can go back 10 years plus. Terry Greer was one of them. He started, if you look at the data from HISD, the decline of HISD started with Terry Greer. It started literally. So if you look at that data, and I can tell you, because I've been at the board meetings, the community was not involved like it should have. And I'm saying that for Black communities, even the West Side communities, they weren't there. But you know what? They were pulling strings from other places. Our community, and I'm just going to speak for ours, they weren't there either because they were too busy being friends with the board members, because that's how the scandal started, because nobody was holding them accountable. It was a lot of stuff that was going on. The best thing that happened, in my opinion, to HISD was the superintendent that jumped up and left and went to New York. He really wanted to make some changes in HISD.
Carranza?
Yes, but he couldn't do it because the politics and the foolishness that was on HISD's board was a mess. It was. And I can tell you from a teacher standpoint, he's the only superintendent that came into HISD and actually talked to the teachers. It was him and his personal officer. He came down to the schools and talked to the teachers, and he tried. Achieve 180 was a good program. It was working, but the board was out of control at the time. And then it got worse under Granita Lathan because she brought a divisiveness to the district. I reached out personally to Elizabeth Santos and told them to stop the foolishness. I said, because they were dividing the district. Because at the end of the day, we don't divide our classrooms Hispanic, Black, white. We teach all the children. And when you have that type of divisiveness in the district, it was causing problems. So those are the things from a teacher standpoint, working from an organization standpoint, and as a teacher, seeing what was going on and the complaints. It was bad in HISD.
I understand, Michelle, but I think that even with all that, right, you didn't have what you have right now.
No, I'm not saying this is better, but I'm saying that it was a decline. We were getting worse.
There were problems. I will say, yeah, there were problems. I had my oldest in HISD at the time, and yes, there were problems, but we were involved. Like and there were other people that were involved, and you also had opt-out going on way back, even when Carranza was there. Opt-out was going on, okay? and there were other things that should have happened and did not happen. But still, the difference is that even back then we could have voted them out. Even back then, we could have gone to the school board. We could have done other things that now we are seeing parents get arrested.
Right. So
Now
here's my question. You're
know,
saying that. Here's my question.
okay.
Do you think if we would have had a strong community presence, TA would have taken over HISD?
Man, what I will say is this is a bigger problem. It's not just HISD.
But
This
that's what
is
I'm saying. If the
nationwide.
community was
Nation,
strong, would they have tried this in a community? Because we
yes,
have research on
yes.
other
It doesn't.
states where the
It
communities
yeah,
and they pushed back and got their school. If
yeah.
our community was stronger and the presence was constantly there, do you think they would have tried to take over
Yes, ma'am,
HISD?
they would have tried it. And I'm gonna tell you why, because we had Trump in office. We had Trump in office and we were a target. And Houston has been a target in a Red Sea for a very long time. They have been wanting to take over public education. And this Houston is an example. It's an example of what's going on in Chicago right now. What's going on with the mayor and Chicago public schools. So yes, they're gonna come after us because
Yes,
that's who wanted
but
I
in the
think
case,
I think they wouldn't have succeeded and
right.
gone as far as they have. But yes,
Right.
they would have had to try.
They would
Yeah,
have
guys.
tried. They would not have succeeded. They would have thought twice about coming after HISD had our community been as strong. And make no mistakes, there have been some silver linings since the takeover. We've had to
Yeah.
build coalition. We had to bring other sides of HISD together. There are some things that have happened that I hope once this is done, people have muscle memory and understand that it takes everybody, whether you can speak English, whether you can't, like, you have to show up. And that's what I would like for, because I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not.
right.
Yeah.
I will
None
not
of
be
it.
leading this charge. I don't have kids in HISD. My son is 30 years old. My grandson is 7. He doesn't even go to school now. I don't pay taxes in HISD. If I leave today or tomorrow, I'm gone. But I
Yeah.
want the community to understand that they have to be there always.
Yeah. I think that, for example, myself as a parent, I was an involved parent. I was in the PTO. I was doing all the stuff, right? All the stuff. And I thought that I was in the know, that I knew things, but I didn't. Because when the state takeover happened, I had no idea that all this mess was going to happen. I didn't really know about board meetings. I didn't know that I could be heard that way. I think it's just, again, a lack of education, a lack of, and also our Latino culture. We trust the teachers. We trust the schools. We trust that our kids are being taught. We're happy they're going to school. We got a lot on our plate. We're working. We got to work. We got to struggle to survive. This is our job, is to just take care of home, and they're being taken care of at school. I think that was kind of the way that a lot of us parents thought, was we trust the schools. We trust that our kids are being taught, because who's going to harm children, right? But that's not what's happening now. And I'm realizing that. And trust me, I will not. My daughter was asking me the other day if I was going to do this for the rest of my life. And I told her, yeah. I told her that I think that this is something that I'm going to have to fight for the rest of our lives, because this is not the first time this has happened to us. This has been happening for centuries, and so I know the only thing that I know that I can teach my children is how to advocate for themselves and how to continue doing that. And I want to leave a legacy where I leave my strong girls that will fight for not just their rights, but for the people around them.
Exactly.
So yes, I think it is very important.
And those are the commitments that it's going to take to protect the school district. And that's the type of things that we need to make sure that people understand. And I've been telling teachers the same thing. You can't speak up twice and say that, oh, I spoke up. No, it's a lasting commitment. We are now in a day and age where teachers are advocates, and we have to advocate for our students. And some voices are not being heard. I impress if there's bilingual teachers watching this. You need to advocate for your students. because that's one of the voices that we did not see or hear for a lot of them in at the board meetings, because we're not in those classes. We see the outside of it and we talk to them, but we can't tell a story that is not our story to tell. But they need
Right.
to advocate for their students and tell the real story about what's happening in bilingual education, because I've had teachers reach out to me and I keep telling them, I say, you have to tell the story, but they don't. And I cannot urge them enough to speak on behalf of your students, because if you allow it to happen to your students, it'll end up happening to your children. So I'm going to close with this. Is there anything else you would like to share about this bond that you want people watching this? Because we have currently 215 people on here watching this live stream. What is that one important thing that you would want them to know and leave them with?
Even if
I
you
think
want a
that the
bond,
bond would be
this is
I
not the
think the
bond for
bond would
us.
be a great thing to have under the right leadership.
Right.
And we don't have that right now.
Nope.
So we might have to reconsider this for a later time.
Exactly.
And
Dulce
it's
said,
okay.
this is
And
not
it's
the bond
okay.
for us.
No. And we've been waiting for a long time already. So, like,
Mhm.
we're in no rush. I mean, the AC issue is not something new. The security issues is not something new. All of these things are things that have been going on for years. So I think it's kind of funny that, we do get more calls now about the AC being out. We do get a lot more notifications about things that are needed in the schools. And I think it's because they want this bond. We cannot give them this bond, you guys. We need the right leadership to talk to our communities. We need people to come and speak to us and hear our input. We need people who are going to listen to us parents, because we are our children's first teachers. We know what our children need. I think that we should fight for something better. Anybody else have any?
No hay confianza. No tenemos
Yeah.
confianza.
No.
Este bono no es para nosotros.
No.
Este
Sin
préstamo
confianza.
no es para nosotros. No nos vamos a endeudar. We're not gonna go in debt. This bond is not for us. This debt is not for us. Vote no. No to Proposition A, no to Proposition B on this HISD bond in November. This bond is not for us.
The fact that our taxes are not going to go up is a lie, because we are still going to have to pay this bond. Our children and our children's children are going to be paying this bond. So I don't agree with it. It's not something that's benefiting my children. It's not benefiting anyone's child right now, the leadership that this money is going to be under. So I say no to the bond.
Mm-hmm. And you heard it here. Say no. And we are teachers against the bond. We love our students. I have been teaching for 25 years. My great grandmother was a teacher. I have 4 of my siblings that are teachers, and well, 3 of them. I'm the 4th one. So we are all educators, and education is the key to open up endless possibilities. If you're an educator watching this and you have families and friends, tell them to vote against this bond, because it's not the bond for us. We can vote. We can have another bond after Miles is gone, because, like my friend said, the way to get rid of somebody who's engrossed in money, there's no money to even look at. So
Yeah.
say no to the bond. Share, like this live stream. If you're on YouTube, share it with a community member. Definitely share it with the Latino community, so that they can hear their voices of these parents and their community leader that represents their community at its bare minimum, which is at the local, in the actual community, not from the
Right.
HISD boardroom. And thank you for tuning in live. Next week, I am going to be talking to special education parents to see their view on the bond and what's been happening in HISD as it pertains to special education. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in our next live stream. Bye-bye.
Thank you.